Hi, my name is Kwach Abonyo, professionally a teacher and a writer. It's nice to have you.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of Conversations in Literature. Today I am joined by Kwach Abonyo, who is a teacher, he's a writer, he's a thinker, he's also a poet, an essayist, and I would also define him as an intellectual troublemaker. He's on the internet. So karibu Kwach.
Asante. Thank you,
Yeah.
Mswahili.
Muswahili. I like
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
I like Mswahili.
Muswahili.
Yeah. Miyamoto Mswahili. I like the name. Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder if I should make it my name. Eric Rugara Miyamoto Muswahili.
I think I love the second part. There's two names.
Yes.
We call them artistic names.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My name is Kwach Abonyo.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have a Christian name,
Mm-hmm.
but I think I use that for corporate.
Mm.
I use that for other styles. But when it comes to writing, or my pen name is Kwach, which I think it embodies the Africanicity, and I like it that way. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So today I have you here in your capacity as a thinker. I've seen you express certain thoughts, especially about African philosophy. I take it this is something that you're very passionate about.
Yes.
And it's a topic really that I think about a lot. Recently, I was here with Odhiambo Kauma. We had a discussion about African culture, African language, and we had a debate on protectionism versus globalism. So he was of the view we should protect, and I was of the view that we should go out, So now I want to have another discussion with you on now African philosophy itself. And I don't know if we should start by defining what African philosophy is, or what do you think?
Well, we first have to define what a philosophy is.
All right.
Philosophy is the study of people's existence, truth, and ways of life. Now, when we talk about African philosophy, we are trying to study these things in the African context, on how they relate to the African lifestyle, the history, and the culture. So this is exactly what African philosophy is. We just study the way Africans think, how they view the truth, how they view the knowledge, and how these relate to their culture, their history, and all the context of Africa. Yeah.
When people talk about philosophy and they define philosophy, they will talk about Socrates. They will talk about some of these people from the Germans, the Greeks, ancient Greeks. So now the question is that philosophy or is that Western philosophy? Because when you talk about African philosophy, you have talked about African culture. But when people talk about Socrates, they don't say Greek culture. They say it's universal. So how come African philosophy isn't universal, but what Socrates is saying is universal?
One of the things that we have to agree that African philosophy, like any other thing concerning Africa, has been in constant struggle. The same way we have been trying to understand our identity. And you do find that since independence, we have something that can meaningfully belong to us. So when we speak about the African philosophy, this is the first, I think this is the first concept, the way you are defining it from the Socratic lens or the Eurocentric lens is one of the things that motivated the African thinkers to define or to find a way or find something that is uniquely theirs. So the first thing the African philosopher or the early thinkers of African, we can call them the originators of African philosophy, brought was to, bring the concept of definition of African philosophy from the Eurocentric lens. They decided to define philosophy in their own understanding. That yes, we have to define an African philosophy in the way we understand it as African, but not in the way that the Europe can understand it, in the way that the West understand it. So it is the way in which the African think about knowledge, truth, self, in which they find their identity, but in the African sense. So it doesn't have to appeal to the Western model. It has to appeal to African themselves. And so we don't have to talk about universal. There's not universal. Philosophy is not universal.
So the question is,
yes,
why is Western philosophy made to appear as if it is universal? But because we studied philosophy in campus.
Yeah.
There was one we had like 3 units when I was studying in campus, and I remember this is when I was introduced to the Plato, the apology,
the Socrates.
I remember my lecturer used to talk about Nietzsche. So I don't remember anyone talking about Odero or Ruka or some African person.
Yeah.
When they taught us philosophy in campus, they taught us Western philosophy. And they did not even tell us about Confucius, China. They did not tell us about Buddha. They did not tell us about Solomon, Hebrew. They told us about the Greek, ancient Greek, and they told us about some modern philosophers from the West. So basically, the entire tower of what philosophy is, it's an edifice built on Western philosophy. Why is it that here in Kenya, in Africa, we are learning Western philosophy as philosophy, and then African philosophy is like a kageto on its side? It was like, this is what African philosophy is.
That's a very good question, Eric. As I said before, Africans is in search of itself. It has been struggling to define itself. And I remember sometimes back in my social media, we were trying to discuss with a friend. Remember you telling me about the stages of the Africa. There's the pre-independent Africa. There's the independent Africa and the post now, in which we do not actually know where we fall. You see, now the fact that we have been exposed to Eurocentric philosophy or the Western philosophy does not mean that the African philosophy is not there. And I think the African philosophy has been suppressed the same way the African itself, the continent itself, has been suppressed in many other things, the history, their identity, and all other things. So when the philosophy came, the philosophers or the earliest architects of the African philosophy began working on this. The first thing they did was to do away with this suppression, to tell the world that there is also an African thought system that is independent of the European system, that it is also as good as the European system.
As good as?
Yeah,
as good as or better?
Actually, philosophy.
Why should there be an as good as? Why should there even be a comparison?
Philosophy, there's no comparison. Philosophy, as I said, philosophy, I think there's a point I made that I think I have to rectify. Philosophy actually is universal. It should be. But universal in the sense that it is accepted in our way, but it has also to make sense of the other world, other part of the world.
Does it have to?
Yeah.
Why is there a have to? Why does it have to?
Because philosophy needs logic. You see.
Let me ask you.
Yeah.
Is philosophy something you create so that it makes sense out there, or is it something you create to make sense of your life here?
It has to make sense to life
Here.
Here.
But
because
why
in
should
Africa,
it make sense there if it's making sense here?
Because philosophy philosophy has to be subjected to questioning. It has to undergo rational thought. It has to be analyzed. And so if it is analyzed and approved by the other parts, then it is actually what makes it a philosophy.
But
we are here.
You're not answering my question.
We are here.
You see, if you have the philosophy and you are analyzing it, are you analyzing it also with the thought of, does it make sense to people out there? Yet it makes sense here.
It has to make sense to us. You see, it has to make sense to us. That's actually what defines an African
You know, the
philosophy.
question, the reason I'm asking this
Yes.
is because we have pre-colonial, right?
Mhm.
We didn't have out there at that time. We had here.
Mhm.
Do you think our elders, when they were developing proverbs, were thinking about universal?
Okay.
I'm sure if it's Kikuyu or Masai or Kalenjin or Luo elders, I don't think the Kalenjin elders, when they are making proverbs for their community, are thinking, will this make sense to the Luo elders? Or was there an inter-elder? Council for them to
I don't like the aspect of reducing to the example of proverbs, because that is one trend of philosophy the African philosophy itself has been against. When you talk something like folk tales, proverbs, these are called ethnophilosophy. In the sense, I think it was one of the first philosophical trend before independence. And one of the disadvantage of ethnophilosophy is that it limited African thought system to the group or customs. It was not. It did not expose Africa to like the philosophy that could be
universal.
Yeah, universal, and could actually be critically examined and reasoned about. So ethnophilosophy was one of the things, or one of the trends that had been faced out by the early philosophers like Oruka and Kwasi Wiredu. So when people like Oruka came, or Wiredu came, they decided to do away with the ethnophilosophy, the sense of the proverbs being the sense of reason for an African people, and say that even within the African tradition, there is still logic and reasons among people that could guide their lifestyle, just as in the West there are people who are thinkers, original thinkers with distilled knowledge that could guide the lifestyle of the West. It does not mean that the African, even though they had no written record, could not document, did not have a working philosophy for them. Yeah.
So in the pre-colonial times, there was ethnophilosophy, and
there was philosophy.
So there was a philosophy that was linked directly to the environment where the community is. So philosophy, the philosophy was ethno in that sense, because if it is the philosophy of the Luo, it was philosophy that fits that community. And now later, these modern African philosophers, they would want to modernize African philosophy by purifying it, by removing it from its environment and, in a sense, elevating it to a more universal level. So let's filter out what is brought by the environment and say, once we subject this to scrutiny, which of these things still stand? So if it is standing for the pre-colonial law, is it standing for Kenya today, or for Africa as a whole, or for anybody in the world who is reading that will they find that the logic there stands to scrutiny? So they purify it. So they say that was ethnophilosophy, and now, but inside there are kernels of what we will call African philosophy.
Yeah, true.
Is this what I'm...
yeah, you are trying to bring it well, but I think it's very good to make it clear that ethnophilosophy is what was majorly advocated by the colonial thinkers before the African philosophers think. If you look, for example, the Bantu philosophy that was, I think that was brought in by Placid Tempels. He wrote Bantu philosophy.
Thing?
No, Ubuntu actually is not but Ubuntu actually is what has been accepted currently as the one way of understanding African philosophy. The Ubuntu means that I am because we are. It tends to explore or to argue that the African philosophy is based on communalism. We are. It checks more about togetherness than individualism that has been linked mostly to Western philosophy. So the ethnophilosophy reduced, like people like Temples, when writing about African philosophy, they said that African philosophy, or they thought that African philosophy was reduced to these customs and beliefs only. That, there is no individualistic world view of an African thinker. They think as a community, and their thought system is pegged on the customs and their beliefs. This is what, like, Luos think as Luos, and the customs or how they think is linked to their customs and practices.
And it's not.
And that they did not recognize that individual Luos, there could be some people who could do what? Who could have independent thinkings and also have critical evaluation of the customs themselves. So when we talk about African...
But before you come to that,
yeah,
you say we need to scrutinize that a little bit. Yeah? Weren't independent thinkers ostracized by the community? Like, if you are an independent thinker and what you are thinking goes against what the community thinks, won't you be kicked out of the community?
Not kicked out in the sense, but yes, a philosopher, in some sense, always face the opposition from the society in which they live.
True.
Yeah, most of them I've seen from the time immemorial, we have read, most of the thinkers were never really fit in the society. Yeah.
So now my question is, do we have a cultural memory of such thinkers?
Yes.
In our communities, like there was a certain person in the community whose way of thinking was so different and radical.
We had.
Yes.
We had, but now the challenge is that
can you speak on that? Yeah.
We had that only challenge that they were not documented. That actually had
that's
the
my
major
that's
challenge.
my question.
Yeah.
We have a cultural memory.
Yeah.
It's a cultural memory. It's documented.
There had been, and I think one example I can give back to my Luo community, though I don't say that he was an illiterate per se, but this person that Oruka writes about is the first Luo elder, if I'm not wrong. It's called Ker Paul Mboya. He wrote a Luo book called Luo Kitigitimbege, the customs and the way of life of the Luo community. And in this book, Mboya explains the customs of the Luo and what he feels should be distilled and what he feels should actually be kept. This is the difference between a philosopher and a folk. A folk sage. There's what we call the sage philosophy. A philosophic sage is someone who will check out the custom and says that, no, this is good, but this is not rational. This that does not make sense. I think we should drop this. And that a sage or a folk sage just knows or he have all the knowledge of the customs and he advocate for people to follow them. So there were people.
No, I haven't gotten the difference.
There were people, yes, in the society who, and I just give you an example with Mboya. When he wrote this book, or when he documented, or the writers documented this book, he could point out what he feels should not actually become a custom. What he feels is anachronistic in the sense, and does not feel the modernity, and feel this is good for the society, and the other one is not good for the society. So this is what defines a philosopher: critical evaluation of our customs and how they should be integrated to the society.
From the fact that he wrote a book, it's post-colonial or colonial. But what about pre-colonial? Is more of what I was asking.
The problem is that philosophy, African philosophy, had not been documented. And this is now
I don't think it has to be documented in philosophy. It can be documented in the stories. You know how we have stories about warriors, political leaders. I think if we had some thinkers who backed the trend and were ostracized, and then maybe later their ideas were adopted by the community. The ones we have are the prophets. We have prophets. No, it's true.
Yeah.
We have, let me give you an example. We have Moyo wa Kifiro, and I think Ngoyo Adiongo writes about him in The River Between. And he tries to bring that out, the fact that this man was seeing a certain vision for the community, and he said this is how things are going to be, and people didn't understand it. There's going to be people who are going to come here and here. If people had listened to him, maybe they would have prepared for the invasion, the invaders that were coming. So I don't know if that would be, if you think about it, the prophets, the sages, the medicine men, maybe there are stories about them. Maybe if we were to look at those stories, maybe we would find examples of what I'm asking. Somebody whose idea goes against what the community is saying, but then ultimately it becomes the new thought, because that's what philosophy is supposed
That's
to do.
actually what philosophy is. And I think they are there. And these are some of the, if you read the philosophy of Odera Oruka, he documented some of these people in Luo community. Went down to the villages for some of the elders who had not been exposed to the European model of thinking, or had not received any kind of Western education, sat with them down, questioned them, and analyzed their responses. And I think from there from that research, he found that there are some people who could actually be who could actually distill what is custom based and what is philosophy based. So it is very possible. Even now in the village, there are some people who, yes, you see this person never went to school in the sense he's illiterate, but you sit with this person down and you begin to argue. The kind of argument they give you tells you that he's a philosopher. And so this is what actually Odera Ruka was trying to say when he developed the philosophic sagacity. He said that within the African villages, that people who have not been exposed to the Western mode of education, has not gone to school, but these people are able to think philosophically. Let me give you an example. And I always say, if you want to check philosophy, check at things that are very, very relational. You have read Achebe, and in Things Fall Apart, there's one character there called Obiarika. I think that can be a very good example.
And I was actually thinking about this.
Obiarika. You see, the way Obiarika is portrayed in the book, now that is what we call, that is an example of a philosophic sage. He knows everything happening within the Igbo community, but he has to question some of their of the customs of the community, like the killing of the Ikemefuna, such things.
I think Arrow of God also has this. Have
you
read Arrow of God?
Yeah, Ezeulu.
The discussions that Ezeulu has with a lot of his friends, they are quite philosophical, and especially when they are talking about the priests. They're saying, my father told me this, and this is what the priest of Ulu, or
Yeah. It was the chief priest of Ulu.
Oh, as
Ulu himself was the chief
priest of Ulu has said this. But actually, this is what the priest of Idi, or I don't remember the other god, what it was called. This is what he says is correct. And this is what this priest says is correct. And you can see I think there's a good presentation of philosophy as it was in the pre-colonial times and how different ways of thought struggled.
Yeah.
Because you can see even some, like Ezeulu, I don't remember correctly, but I think he had a certain way of thinking that he is bringing, and the community has a different way of thinking, and there is a struggle of this.
There's a struggle, and everyone in his downfall comes from that internal struggle. He always he has that what we call the soliloquy. He questions himself a lot, does one thing for the community, but also do the other that is against the community. Like, when accepting to meet the Europeans, always in constant touch with them. So you see such things. These people are able to evaluate. There are some people like that in our community, in the African community, who are able to evaluate what is custom-based and what is,
So there are people. We still have them, but then there is the aspect of how do you spread this idea across this community so that it can, then the thought, if the thought stays with, you say he's in the village.
Yeah.
If the thought stays with him in the village, it is only one man's worldview. I think it becomes a philosophy when it spreads,
it spreads,
because either it's written, documented, or it is spread like a gospel, and more people learn it. So traditionally, I suppose the elders were in charge of this, yes? But what about when you had one person whose idea is different? How would he spread the idea?
I'll say that it's quite challenging for philosophy to become monolithic for the community or the society in which it is birthed. And Eric, you can bear me witness, nearly all philosophers began as independent thinkers. Socrates began by questioning people, throwing questions in the market, and and then later on Plato comes and documents these things.
There's also if you say Jesus,
something like that. You see, like
Jesus going to the marketplace. Going to the marketplace. Is the way to do it.
It's just you have to start somewhere. Philosophy, I feel it first begins individually, critical evaluation of the mind, and then you start to tell people about this, then it spreads. And I think this has been the major challenge when it comes to African philosophy. But then there's something that I think I should also make clear. African philosophy, in contradistinction to the Western one, is more about communal. And it is things that we relate with in our daily lives. It is more about what we are as a community. Not, the Western philosophy, like when you talk about the philosophy of René Descartes, I think therefore I am. It begins from the individual self, from the individual perspective. But African philosophy, like the Ubuntu philosophy, which has actually been accepted to be a map, how do we call it? A general representation of the African philosophy, states that I am because we are.
Let me ask you.
Yeah.
This narcissism of the Western philosophy, where does it start? Do you have it in Plato and Socrates?
The I am, it is me mostly actually is attributed to the Middle Ages, like the Descartes, and it is actually the foundation of the modern philosophy. Now we have two categories of the...
Because if you look at Plato's Republic, he's talking about, there's a communalism in the way he looks at it.
Yeah, true.
He says that the democracy is the wrong way of looking at it. He says the nation should, and tyranny is bad. But the nation and monarchy he wanted a sort of aristocracy of the sages. So he is looking at the good of the community, and it's not I am, it's what do we do for
We
the
are,
common
we
good?
are, and that's what I'm saying. That the foundation of the modern philosophy, or let me call modern Western philosophy, begins with the Middle Age thinkers.
And where did they get it?
I think that is now comes from the Enlightenment.
And where did the Enlightenment get it? Because I sometimes I think it came from Christianity.
Yeah, people like Aquinas began to write about. People like Aquinas began to write about the essentialism.
But where did Aquinas get it?
Philosophy is how do we say it is? It develops itself with each generation.
Didn't it come from the Gospels?
To some degree, the foundation of the modern philosophy in the West began
because
from there.
My
from the
theory
Gospel.
is this. You see, the Gospel talks about. The Gospel is talking about helping people and so forth, right? But the Gospel is also very individualistic. Prior to the Gospel, you have the Judaism, which is communal, right? But then Jesus comes and he says, the Pharisees are telling you to do this, which is good for the community. But I tell you to do this. Break the rules. So people start breaking the rules. As an individual, he tells them, before they used to think of the community, the Messiah will come and save us as a whole. But he comes and tells them, Messiah is coming for one person at a time. He's coming for one person at a time. He says, 2 will be in the house. 1 will be taken. The other will be left. He says, 2 will be in the field. 1 will be taken. The other will be left. He says, I'm bringing sword. Father against son. Child against parent. Wife against husband. And he says, the kingdom of heaven is in your heart. It's very personal. I think that's when the individualism comes. It's personal.
Yeah.
It's mine. The kingdom of heaven is in my heart. Alone.
Yeah.
It's not me as a... We are not in the kingdom together. I am in the kingdom in my heart. I could be with you here, but I can't bring you to the kingdom. I can only go on my own. I feel this might be the genesis of that.
It comes from there. I'll actually agree because when people like Aquinas write and questions the essence of human, they try to find the relation between human and God. Like, what exactly is the purpose of our existence? Did we just come? Is there a purpose for us before we were born, or are we there? This is where the essentialism comes, and then people like Descartes comes and says, like, what exactly? Who am I? You see, they begin to question themselves individually without pointing or linking the being to something else, and the fact that this is where Descartes' skepticism begins. Okay. That sometimes maybe what we are is illusion. We actually do not know who we are. Then it goes on and conclude that the fact that I'm thinking, then it means I am. The essence, the existence itself. How does it relate to my being? To my being. Yeah. So the foundation of the modern philosophy begins from Descartes. I can say that. But then out of it, other things are born. Things like the existential philosophy, where Nietzsche's come, and Kant with this idealism and all those other things are born. So this actually what built the foundation of the modern philosophy, because there is also the classical philosophy, which are made up of the Socrates.
Classical Western.
Yeah, the classical philosophy. Western philosophy. Thank for that.
Yes.
Yeah. So you see, these are the kind of philosophy has been always developmental. It always develops. It always generates itself. And when we began the African philosophy, the African philosophy did not begin from the self. It begins from the community. I am because we are. The Ubuntu philosophy teaches us that. Okay. And so this is what makes it different from the Western philosophy.
So I want us to cross the ocean to the east. What do you know about Eastern philosophy?
I think the Eastern philosophies, some of the major Eastern philosophies, the Taoism and the Confucius philosophy,
And the Buddhism.
And the Buddhism. The
And you could also say Hinduism.
Hinduism, all in that. And I think Eastern philosophy is more about I will say they're more about the self understanding the inner being, the peace within yourself.
My question is,
Yeah.
because I just thought about that. You know, we were talking about individualism. Why is it that in the East it's about the self as well, but it does not lead to individualism? Is it because they are renouncing the self?
I think the East philosophy, in my understanding, I'm not well exposed to it, but having read Taoism and Confucius philosophy, I'll say that the East tends to recognize that within an individual, there is always voices. And so you have to bring harmony within these voices within you. This is what majorly the Eastern philosophy focuses on. You have to win within before you win outside. You win outside. Yeah.
You know, the interesting thing about the East, they have the folk philosophy, culture that is.
Yeah.
They have the Shintoism in Japan.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they have this more professional side, which is through the monks at the monasteries, through the religion.
Yeah.
We didn't have that in Africa. We just have the folk philosophy. Yeah. So we didn't. I don't know if we had that sort of tradition where we have a certain way of thinking being passed on in a certain school. I don't think we had that in our communities, but we may have had it in places like West Africa, where they have the Timbuktu, the University of Mali, where the scholars used to go there, but now that brings in Islam.
Well, I think, Rick, one thing you have to recognize is that saying that we did not have it may look, how can I say it? I think it's just the fact that there's something within us that was disrupted.
No, I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying we had the folk philosophy of the community, but we didn't have schools of philosophy.
Yeah, there were no schools of philosophy.
And you see, when you have a school of philosophy, when you are not writing, what that leads to is a tradition, like a chain over the centuries, and development over the centuries. And it can't, and that chain of a school, the thinking in that school need not be linked to what is happening in the community. So the philosophy they develop need not be what the ordinary people live by. Because, like, let's say when you talk about Buddhism, it is very lofty. The ordinary people are not living according to it. It's the people who wanted to be, enlightened masters. So it was people who would actually abandon society to go and live in a monastery to meditate and to transform themselves. So in that community, it already looks like philosophy is not part of the community. Same thing in the West. These people who are practicing philosophy, Akina Plato, Akina Socrates, you mentioned Aquinas, these are people who are also different from the rest of the society, either because they are either elites, they are maybe aristocrats, or they are in the church, they are in the monasteries, or in the case of Socrates, he's a sort of a gadfly who is sort of a rebel, and he has his disciples. But my thinking is, in our communities, we had the elders, yes, but this kind of philosophy which is not directly influencing the community, where thought itself is supreme, it was not yet a thing, maybe. Because even when you look at Okonkwo, the Ezeulu, this is somebody whose philosophy and the thinking is going to affect the community. So when you come with an idea which the community rejects, you are also rejected.
And I think that's also brings us back to the documentation of the philosophy. Philosophy, and some of the things that scholars agree with, that we might have had this authentic African view, even in our society back in our communities, little communities in Africa. But it lacked documentation. There might have been an elder with disciples, like any other people in the West, teaching this and that on how to live life and how to live an authentic life, but they were not documented. So there was the challenge of passing it on to the generation. I think the reason why we are talking even about philosophy up to this very moment, the Western philosophy, is the fact that they were documented. Without Plato, I wonder if the Socrates would have done what? Will have known.
That's a fair point. It's a fair point because it could mean that philosophy is something that becomes philosophy after you're gone, right? If you see the thing that with the documentation is that you die and your words live on.
True.
So basically you die but your idea lives on after you. But without documentation in Africa, pre-colonial, I die, my idea dies with me.
True.
And now, which means that the radical thought does not bear fruit. Unless I or one of my disciples becomes an elder or somebody powerful of influence and then manages to influence the rest of the community.
I'll argue, and this is personal, I'll argue that the African philosophy, I'll argue that yes, we would have had these authentic African views that were passed by a small group of maybe thinkers within the African traditions, but being that these things were passed over and over again over a long period of time, they later on developed into customs that most of Africans later believe. Though this is just a theory of my own, because I've also questioned that if we claim to be philosophical, then why is it that there is not something authentic about the way the African think? There must be something. Like if you check, for example, the Proverbs, just sat down and this.
That's why I brought it up. And remember, you rejected it.
I'm saying, but the Proverbs now are seen in ethno-lens.
It's codified. It's our codified philosophy.
Very codified philosophy. Very good. It's not seen as something that is independent of thought. It is seen in the anthropological lens. When people come to, for example, study the Proverbs of the Gikuyu community, they don't become as philosophers, they come as anthropologists. You see, study of folk tales are not philosophy, those are anthropology. So it means that probably our way of passing, because as I said, African philosophy is more about living. It's life itself, and it was passed through stories, how we interacted with one another,
now you're talking.
How we lived.
Now you're talking.
Now, this is what the early architects of African philosophy, like the temples, when he wrote about ethnophilosophy or the Bantu philosophy, he saw it through only this lens, that African philosophy is more about the community customs. Then this is what we are trying in the modern African philosophy to expurge. We are trying to say that yes, we have this, but even within us there's some critical thought system that are authentic, that are subjected to argument and reason, like the Western philosophy. Because when you reduce the African thought system to an ethnic viewpoint, then we are no longer talking about philosophy. We are talking about anthropology.
Yes. Yeah. I like this because the reason I was bringing up proverbs and stories is because my belief is that You see, we didn't have documentation,
Yeah, true.
but we had a way of living our ideas to move on to the next generation through stories, through proverbs, folk tales and proverbs.
Yeah, true.
I feel this was actually the way. And if you read that book by Chinua Achebe, The Arrow of God, you can see these people sort of, when he says that, I think that was Things Fall Apart, that proverbs are the
palm wine,
yes,
with which words are eaten.
Yes, yes,
among the Igbo community.
Yes,
yeah.
And when this white man says that these people, they're too talkative, they're using proverbs everywhere.
Yeah.
But these proverbs are how they are expressing their ideas. And when you read The Arrow of God, back to it, you find these elders. I think you even find them developing. I don't remember, but developing proverbs in the process. Like, there is a sense you feel that these are the same people who come up with these proverbs.
Yeah, yeah.
The proverbs are not just old, but they are also new. They are also created, and you find that old proverbs will explain something happening today. When you came here, you saw I had this book, Facing Mount Kenya, by Jomo Kenyatta. So there's a story he tells there. There's a story there from the community. It says, many years ago, or many years back, there was a king among the Kikuyu. They had a king, and the king is the grandson of Gikuyu, who was the founder of the tribe. And then the king, the people are nomadic, and they were moving around looking after cattle and everything. But the people wanted to settle down, cut down the trees and start farming. But the king refused. So the people go and rebel against him, and they overthrow him, and that becomes what is called the first Kiama. And Kiama means party. And now that was called Itueka, which is now we have taken power. And from the place I had read it, they say that this is when now they created the constitution of the community. And what is the constitution is where now you have the things like you have a council. You have a council is a Kiama. So you have a council here, and you have a council there, and you have a council there. So there is a sense of democracy. There is no political leader there is no king. So it's like, in that process, we said, we don't want kingpins. We don't want kings anymore. So if you look even at the political thinking or the political behavior of the Kikuyu today, they are always overthrowing their kingpins. And there is a sense where the people have that, they call it duraku. So it's like the masses have an energy that the person at the top can tap, but not direct. So when the people turn on him, there's nothing he can do. So I find it in that proverb. So that story, for me, demonstrates how new thinking can come into the society. So if the old thinking was, you have a king or you have a leader, but now these people have rebelled, and we want this new thinking of, I don't want to call it democracy because it's Western. I don't know what you call it, the Council of Elders, that sort of system. And it's the Council of Elders, not over the entire community. It is in your area. So the entire community is very large. So if here in this area we have a Council of Elders, the next area they have their own. How do you call that system? And how does such a system develop? And for that system to develop, I'm sure there were times when some people tried to amass power and become rulers or kings, but they did not succeed, right? We had kings in Uganda, right? The Kabakas.
Yeah,
we didn't have kings in Kenya.
Yeah.
Why is it that we didn't have kings in Kenya? And why is it that it was spread across the communities in Kenya? Was it something that all these communities, they just suddenly had no kings? Or was it an idea that spread around the communities? The same way when we study about our pre-colonial tribes, we learned that something like circumcision. This community got circumcision. I think we used to be told that we got it from the Gala.
Yeah. It's always inherited.
It was the Kushites.
Yeah.
We got circumcision from them. We got this from them. What about this idea of not having kings or chiefs? Like you have, although some communities had these, Orkoyot, who is is almost like a king. It's one leader who is
supreme.
Yes, but where do all these other communities get that way of thinking? Is it that they have one origin, or that these ideas spreads from one community to another? And isn't that philosophy in itself? Like when they talk about us as human beings, we do not need to be led by one man. We, the people, can decide. We can have a council of elders which will represent the best of us. And now when you listen to those people, they say that the people who joined the council of elders were people who were of this caliber, people who were wise, people who understood justice and things like that. Aren't these ideas that we are actually discussing when we read about Plato, the Republic?
Yeah, true.
Ideas of justice, liberty, all those things.
True, but you can also understand, and if you read back history, you know that every history of a philosophical thinking began from a single point, and then it spread. Most of the modern Western philosophy are mostly attributed to Germans, most of the German thinkers. And this is what is being embraced mostly in Europe by most European countries as the authentic European or Western philosophy in the modern sense. So yes, philosophy are spreading. Philosophy can be born from one single point and then inherited by others, and then spread to other parts of the society. Right now we are talking about Ubuntu as an African philosophy. Ubuntu is more of, I think it is among the Xhosa and the South African communities. The Xhosa and these are the Zulu mostly, yeah. It is a philosophy that begins there. But why do we say Ubuntu is the archetype of the modern African philosophy? Because when you
is it that it begins there, or their name begins there?
Actually, philosophy becomes from actually
because
the
when you do look at our communities, we may not have called it Ubuntu, but we had it.
Of course,
you even look at how we do. We have this Kwaito, Rorashio,
all these stuff. What I'm saying, the idea.
It's the idea of the people, the community, your family.
Yeah.
Your family will come with you to get the girl. You don't go alone. They will even contribute.
What
Ubuntu?
Yeah, Ubuntu is just a name. We are talking about the philosophy it embodies.
Okay.
Yeah, the same way a word is the same meaning, but
no. I was questioning when you say it begins from South Africa.
Yeah.
But my question is, isn't it actually embodied in all our African communities?
Yeah, it's embodied in that sense. It tends to be monolithic in regards to the African philosophy, because Ubuntu advocates for communalism, the sense of togetherness among the African society, that we are, or I am because we are. That's actually the aphorism behind Ubuntu. And then if you look anywhere in African, most African community tend to have this, live through this aphorism.
So I have my being through our being.
Yeah. Allow me to give an example. I think I like one of the current Kenyan poet that I like very much is Odhiambo Kauma. And there's this poem from his book which I really enjoy all the time. And if you ask me the best Odhiambo Kauma's poem, I'll point it out. It is called An Old Voice from Home. If you read this poem, you will understand the entire aspect of an African philosophy. The writer here is trying to is trying to address a man who left the village. It's called Adongo Jak Kagan, so the son of Kagan. So this guy might have left the village for the city to fend for himself, but in the process, if he strays into the modern life of the city and forgets the life back in the village. And so the voice is telling him to remember back where he comes from. Like the constant question that Kauma asks here is, do you think of home? I think I love the poem. I wish I could memorize it. But he asked him, do you think of home? Think about when the evening, when the sun is glowing down over the waters of Lolwe, and we sit by the heart, seeing hens and all the things going back, and then we talk about each other, and your brother calling you for tea. You see, it might not be the geographical position here, but I think if you ask me one way to explain the African philosophy is through this poem, that a man's identity and meaning is linked to the community or where it comes from. It is not solely you are. And at the end of the poem, the writer asks, that were you not told that why you not told why the dead are buried in their ancestral land? It is because they hold your feet when you walk. You see, the African identity is linked to where we come from. That even the spirit themselves, even the dead, guide us. They are not dead, but they still become part of the cultural and the ethnic ecosystem that we are talking about. So you look at the way Africans are and the way we live, we tend to embody the spirit of togetherness. I think this is what you look, most of the African society tend to have this universal lifestyle. And I think this is all what the African philosophy is trying to explain.
So now let's talk about things falling apart. So we had the African philosophy, but things fell apart. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world, the center cannot hold. Things have fallen apart. You know that poem by W.B. Yeats, which Chinua Achebe used for his book. I remember some years ago, 2015, I was in the village, 2014 actually. So I was walking and I meet this mzee. Let's say he was like 70 years old and he was very drunk. And you know how, a typical village drunkard, because he was a drunkard, somebody who drinks a lot and, even shabbily dressed and everything. So he approaches me and I don't even remember what he said to me, or whether he said hello to me and I said hi back, and I don't know what led to him or me having a conversation, but we ended up having a conversation. And funnily enough, he was telling me about his education. He told me that he had studied engineering or something like that at the school of Dar es Salaam in 70 or something. And he said he called it Shule ya Ufundi. Shule ya Ufundi.
The Swahili,
yes.
the TZ.
Yes. But I guess he couldn't find a job or something like that, or things happened and he became a drunk. But now, even when he was speaking, the accent that he had, it was a very European accent when he speaks in English. Because we were speaking our local language, but then he speaks some things. Have you read Things Fall Apart? Things Fall Apart. And the way he says it, and I think it's something you have seen with Kenyans above a certain age.
They were educated by the white.
Yes. So you find that their English is very English. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And their Kiswahili is also equally terrible.
Yeah.
I don't know about Luhya.
It's true.
I don't know about Luhya older people because Luhyas speak very good Kiswahili. But I've seen the rest. Our parents and grandparents, their Kiswahili is terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible. but their English, was top notch. So now he's the one who actually told me about Things Fall Apart. And he told me, have you read that book? I had not read it, but I was still impressed. He told me Things Fall Apart is about about how the colonization came and how it disrupted our African culture.
Yeah.
Don't ask me why we were talking about Things Fall Apart with him. I don't even know how it was just like how we were having a conversation.
Yeah.
It just went randomly that side, and he told me that. So then, after this is when I went and looked for the book and read it, and sure enough, this was what happened. Things fell apart with the coming here of the British Empire.
Yeah.
The imperialism.
Yeah.
And I guess that is also now why, to this day, I was asking you earlier about philosophy. When we study philosophy as Africans in our own universities, they are teaching us about Socrates. As that is the basis, or that is the basic idea of what philosophy is.
Which I disagree.
Yet this is the basic idea of Western philosophy.
Yeah, a Western philosophy. It should be like that.
Yes.
Not the basic idea of what philosophy is. Because when we talk about philosophy, the first thing that comes to people's mind is, wow, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. All this, the Western concept of philosophy. But when Wiredu, now let me talk about one of the greatest opponents of the African philosophy. Kwasi Wiredu, Ghanaian philosopher, when he came, he tried to dispatch this and say, bring what we call the conceptual decolonization, that we have to define philosophy in our own way, in our own language, the way we understand and the way we know it. But though it did not entirely omit the Western philosophy, he said if we have to bring in the concept of the West, then it has to be in line with our own philosophy. It doesn't have to, we don't have to mimic the way they want. It must simply be to speak for our own thought system. Yeah, we can borrow them. We can critically integrate some of their thoughts into our thought system. Yeah, so, and one of the thing the earliest proponent of philosophy did was to criticize the Western view of philosophy, because they made philosophy to be so individual. How can I say it? They became so selfish.
Narcissistic.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, they made philosophy to be their own. And so these people come and say that, no, you don't have to define for us philosophy. We are going to define it in our own way and the way we understand it. And that is how we see philosophy. And so these people, I think the notion of having philosophy seen only from the Western viewpoint is wrong. It is utterly wrong. We define philosophy in our own way. For example, we don't have to start philosophy by defining some of the branches of philosophy. We have to start with logic, metaphysics, all those other things. We can start philosophy by storytelling in Africa, which I think is one of the trends and a very powerful tool in defining African philosophy, because our philosophy tends to be aesthetic. We see things in beauty, in the way they are, in forms, and how we relate to them, on how we relate to them. So, like when I talk about philosophy, when we begin talking about philosophy, first we have to check what we are talking about must relate to us. It must relate to the community as well. So, for example, Achebe writing Things Fall Apart, for example, that was a philosophy itself. The ideas that embodies the book is actually philosophy, because it speaks about the African, the relationship of African, and how they relate with their thought system and such.
I wanted you to speak on the aspect of colonization and what colonization does to African thought, yes? And how colonization and African thought, being thus colonized, how that influences the fortunes of Africa post-colonial, post-independence, economically, politically, socially, spiritually?
I will always say that before the colonial came, and I think this was in a response to a friend who asked me this same question in social media. Before the colonials, the Europeans came, we were in a civilization continent. I've always said this. People think that we were just people who were there. We didn't have a sense of direction. We didn't have a sense of meaning. We were just there. And so these people comes to do what? And to give us life. And I was seeing some argument video on TikTok where a European was arguing with a fellow in a panel like this.
I think I posted that video.
Thank you.
Yes,
I remember that. You see, arguing and saying, you know what, it was very wrong to colonize Africa and say that we brought them civilization, we brought them roads.
Yes. She actually said, we brought them creativity.
Imagine. You see that? I think it is just actually the aspect, that is actually the tools of colonization, to kill what is there. And then start something from a substratum, from the ground.
And what happens to the culture when you have to start on a new foundation that is not even compatible with your culture? So you talked about individualism. So they've brought this new culture of individualism. What happens? What happens to us, to the culture that we are trying to build on this new force foundation?
Oh, it has to. The culture has to be in limbo. We, at one point, we are trying to strain from what this new force that is pulling us. At the other time, we are trying to remain on the other side. On the other side, you can see this from Achebe's Things Fall Apart, when one of his sons, converts to Christianity, and Okonkwo has to almost runs mad. It doesn't believe It does not believe that his own child can embrace a new culture completely different from his own. And I think when this new culture came, our own culture had to die, because for a colonialist to rule, he has to kill first the culture that is there, because culture is togetherness, culture is solid.
But let me ask you.
Yeah.
You know, there is this tendency to lump the missionary and the one who wielded the gun together. But actually, when you look into it, these people wanted to preserve African culture.
Really?
Yeah.
How?
They wanted you people to there's a essay Achebe writes, and he's criticizing Ngoge. Because Ngoge has said that as an African,
the language,
yes, the language thing. Yeah. And then he says, and then he quotes Ngoge from the same book, Decolonizing the Mind, where Ngoge is talking about the Kikuyu independent school movement and the independent churches. They split the church, the independent church. They split from the missionaries, because first of all, they wanted to continue doing female circumcision. And then second of all, the education that their children were getting, they wanted to teach them English, but the missionaries wanted to teach them Kikuyu. Or in Kikuyu. But then actually Achebe quotes that. Achebe quotes that.
You had this conversation,
and I've seen Dr. Wandi Njoya talk about the same. She says that people say that the missionaries and the colonizers wanted us to become European, but she argues actually that they are the ones, you see what you call ethno-philosophy. They are the ones who are more concerned with that ethno.
Let me tell you, Eric. There's something called, how do I put it? Conquering by conviction. When you want to conquer man, you must have to make this person believe in something. And to believe in, it has to be something that is connected to what he values most, which in this context is culture. Culture is something that is supposed to be preserved among the African community. And so you can't, this was just a psychological, in my view, a psychological weapon. I don't know the right word I can use, but it was more of a psychological weapon that the missionaries were using. And the history of colonialism, you know very well, the history of colonialism begins with missionaries.
True.
Then the missionaries coming to Kenya or in Africa have first to get permission from the king in England. And when they even, the queen or the king from England, when they even get here, they have to write constantly about what they find in Africa. They have to write about them back home. Tells them that I discovered this. I discovered a lake here and I will have to name it after Victoria. This is now called Queen Lake Victoria. You see such things. And so these missionaries come, and the first thing, they pave way for explorers comes, they pave way for the missionaries who later come and pave ways now for the annexation of the continent itself. And so what the device that the missionaries used was to find something that will relate or to convince Africa that what they are doing is best. And one of them was to get deeper into their language. You know what these people did first? They had to learn our language, our own language. They lived among us for years, pretended to be our friends, learned our language. And now they have to convert us from our own language. And language is culture. That's why I support Ngugi very much. Language is powerful and it is culture. And this is what Kwasi already even speaks about. If we have to write philosophy, we must use our own language in the way we understand. The moment you turn a meaning of even a word, even the philosophy itself changes. The moment you begin even to write your African thought in English, it has some European connotation or the English connotation in it. So I don't think that these people meant well for us. I'll say this without a fear of contradiction.
Do you think Achebe was being defensive?
Achebe, I think Achebe, the article you're talking about, I think I've read it. He argues that I've only been, and he later argues about that I've been forced to use this as a means of communication and have no otherwise, because this is the only way I've been. And I think his argument was that to also the same way they used language to conquer us, we can use the language to conquer them, also to tell them who we are. We cannot, criticize the West or the colonialism by our own language. You have to write in their own language, and so that they understand your culture and what they have done. And some degree, I think he had a sense.
But who do you think? You see, it's a question that lingers because Kauma was here, and he was arguing for the protection of the African language from influences. But at the same time, I asked him, which language do you write your poetry? And he said that the way he writes in English, he uses a Luo, maybe Ngeli.
Which is true.
A Luo, But then my question is, even if it's the Luo idiom or the Luo mentality that is coming into this language when you use it, isn't it just enriching the English language?
I think now when it comes to English...
Now, that's why, like, if Achebe is saying, we will do unheard of things to the English language, yes, he's doing it to the English language, but he's enriching the English language.
Yes, he's enriching the English language.
As we are right now.
But yeah, the way we are discussing here. But... we have also to be very realistic.
Like, shouldn't we do this in Kiswahili?
We have to be very realistic. There's the English as a language, and then there's also the English as a communication vessels. This is a conduit of communication, and English is accepted because of its universality.
Universality. That word again.
Yeah.
Why is it that why is it? Have you ever asked yourself?
Yeah.
Let me ask this question. Have you ever asked yourself, why is it that the things of the West as universal. But the rest of us, it's small ghettos, African, Chinese, but the things of the West are universal. Can I answer this question?
Yeah. Yeah.
Colonization.
Yeah, colonization. Empire.
Imperialism.
Yeah.
When we sit here and speak in English, we speak as subjects of empire. Having this discussion.
It's true. Let me give you an example. In the you'll say most English writers until Newton in the 15th, 16th century wrote mostly in Latin when English was already a very rich language. And I think you can understand the sense of why Latin was immediately the means of communication, because the power of the Roman Empire was still lingering within Europe then. Most of the writers, European writers, wrote in Latin.
When we talk about the South American countries, they're called Latin American countries because they speak Latin languages. The Roman Empire still today. Catholic Church, Latin was used until 1962 during the Vatican Council, second. Latin was used in Mass everywhere, even here.
This is, I really understand that. What I'm saying that we have also to be realistic. You see,
realistic.
We have to be realistic.
Pragmatic.
I'm one.
And
of
this
the
word
people.
pragmatic, this word pragmatic, has led to a lot of giving away. Giving away.
There is the intellectual aspect of language. Then there's also the spiritual aspect. I can say the spiritual, how we relate. What the language does for us inside. I'm one of the proponents of the local languages, and I really like when people speak their local language. But as a means of showcasing the utility of a nation, there has to be something common. We have to accept first who we are. That we are a product of colonization. And in that product, we are trying to define ourselves. Out of that, we can now find who we are. Then, finding who we are does not mean we have to reject everything of the colonizer. And this is actually one of the Hantonge's view in his philosophy, that we have become so much obsessed with an African affair to the point that we cannot see anything good with the colonizer. I'm not saying the colonizer was good. I'm being careful. You see? But I'm saying
benefits of colonization.
Not benefits per se, but there are some, for example, the intellectual utility of the for example, the study. African did not have the study of science, physical science and all these other things. The colonizer introduce them to us. We don't have just to waste that away because they are for the colonizer. The system of acquiring knowledge and some of the discipline we are studying now, science and all those things, these are things that were passed down from other people. We don't just have to waste away because they are associated by the colonizer. So this is what I mean by being realistic with ourselves. You see, and this also applies to even the language we use. We don't use this language because we have been colonized or because we don't have a better alternative. I think we just have to know who we are and what we want with ourselves and what the spirit of our philosophy embodies. And that's what we have to stick to. Then we treat this language just only as a conduit of conversation.
Let's even talk about what you said about the Latin languages. They were colonized. Those countries were colonized by the Roman Empire. And eventually, centuries later, they become empires on their own right. Same thing with the English. The English language today, English prior to the invasion of the Vikings was the Vikings from France, the Normans. English was German language, a Germanic language, Anglo-Saxon. With that invasion, English now the English people are invaded by the French Vikings.
King of Normandy.
The Normandy, yes. And these became their rulers. And Latin came into the English language because French is a Latin language. These same English people went and became an empire. They conquered the rest of the world. And look at us right now. We are speaking English. We are speaking the language of the conquered. The people who were conquered in 10 something AD, 1022, I think, or 1066, I'm not sure. We are speaking their language right now. So we are here because of what started with the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, Julius Caesar. What they started, we are here speaking this language because of the consequences of that. But now I want us to look at let's look at the East. Because I say that what we do, we as Africans, if we want to develop, I don't know if we can do it by looking at the West. Because the West has developed through empire. The West, this is what they were taught by the Romans. So how did the British, the French, and all these other countries develop? Conquering, coming to Africa, taking us as slaves, colonizing, using our resources. That's how they've developed themselves, right? But let's look at the East. How has China developed in the last 50 years from a third world country, and right now it's one of the most amazing countries in the world?
Yeah, there's something to learn from China, and I think the history of China is very inspirational, especially to us Africans. I would say, in some sense, for a country or a nation to develop, you have to go outside, not in the sense of conquest, but conquest of other things, intellectual. It doesn't have to be what the Brits do.
Okay.
You see,
I like
and
that.
And I think this is if I look at China, this is the kind of what allow me to use this to weight that the Chinas have embodied, which have actually helped them a lot. They reeled back, saw something was amiss for a long period of time, and you were in that room. I don't know whether you were in that room when Yvonne was speaking and telling us about the history of China, being that there was a time we were contributing for them, not so long ago. At independence, the hunger there was too much that Kenya had to send money to feed the hungry in China. There is two aspects, because China had been an empire itself for a long time. It came disintegrated, came back, and then they come, and later on, faces the economic ideologies that did not fit them. And now in the sense the modern world need each other. Let me say that. Even if we say that we are too independent as African, we still need to trade with other nations. We still have to sell our products outside. And I think their choice as Chinese government was not favorable to them. I mean, their economic ideologies were not favorable to them, and it affected them a lot. So when they come, they had to look inside, and had to, revolutionize their way of doing things, their politics. And I think that is what they can do. Their way of doing things is what they can do.
Yeah, because I was watching this clip, somebody on TikTok the other day, an American. He was talking about the railroad system in China, and he says, I went to China, and what they are doing there with trains, with railways,
the invention, the technology.
Yes. He was speaking specifically about the trains and the rail system, and he said, we are not doing that here. And he said, it's amazing things. And then he said, why aren't we doing it? And he said, because it's not profitable. And then he said, how is China doing it? Because their government is doing it. Those are two things. First, capitalism. The capitalism is not profitable. Second, the government in China is doing it, which means the government in the US is not doing it. That's another ideology, neoliberalism, where the private sector is doing everything. and the government, is not doing a lot.
Yeah.
So he says, he questioned, are we capable of this? Do we have the capacity in terms of knowledge, in terms of technology, in terms of money? Yes, but we are not doing it. Why? It's not profitable. The Chinese are doing it. So it's like, I loved this because it means China is doing the things it's doing because it thinks differently from the West. Which means if we as Africans were just to embrace a different way of thinking, it doesn't have to be Chinese thinking, definitely not Western thinking. And this is why this conversation is important, because what is African thinking? If we can identify this African thinking, it will have an impact, not just on philosophy at an intellectual level. It will have an impact on us politically. It changes how you do economics. So African thinking, if we say we take Ubuntu, how will Ubuntu transform how we do politics? How will Ubuntu transform how we do economics, business, our economic philosophy, how we organize our countries, how we do education, our schools? Matatu culture, will it survive Ubuntu? Will we have to rethink Matatu culture? Like, how do we, if we do this, I believe that Africa, we would even be free.
I think that's actually a very important point, Moswahili. I've been actually asking myself, sometimes I sit alone and I have the madness of a solitary man regarding my country, and I ask myself, will we make it? Will we just one day sit and say, well, here now we are in the right path? Because decades pass and we tend to be sinking low and low. We seems to always, since independence, 60 years later, we still tend to be finding the sense of meaning among us. What is it that we are not doing right? And people will say, oh, leadership, oh, the corruption. Oh, that I'm asking, what is it that we need to do before we even tackle the corruption itself?
We have to know ourselves.
We have to know ourselves. Thank you. We have really to discover who we are. And then in discovering who we are, we probably will come up with an alternative approach to our economic model, aside from the communism or capitalism or the neoliberalism. You see? So these are things that I think we are not daring enough. And always when people ask me, what is the problem with Africa? Oh, people will say, Africans, are corrupt, corruption, bad leadership, this, blah, blah, blah. I'll say the problem with Africa is inability to dare. We are not daring enough. We seems to be in a comfort zone. We are trying to fit within the system that we don't understand totally. You see, we are working with a model that we inherited from the colonial powers. Yet we do not understand first who we are and how we are doing. We are doing it. We have three
three strands of philosophy.
No. The facets of African tradition.
Okay.
We have the pre-colonial, which still lingers among us because it is not yet done. When you see Luos trying to put on those kondo or the sisal and those ostrich feathers, those are some of the hangovers of the pre-colonial culture. Yet in truth, those cultures are still not with us. We are just putting them for the sake, but they are not culture in the sense, because a culture is something you should live in everyday life and should always stay with you. And then we have the colonial, in which we, for example, the writers of today, or people like Ngugi try to explain, and Achebe try to explain in their writing, where we are trying to explain, try to wrestle within the world, within the grip of the colonial powers, to find ourselves. Then now we have the post-colonial, or the independent Africa, in which we completely do not know ourselves. Here, we have a state, we have to govern, we have identity, we have to find, not yet found. Then we have, we are still fighting the neocolonialism effect, such things. And so when you find that all these are problems that need to be addressed, yet they are not already addressed. So when I say the problem facing Africa is because probably our approach of seeing things have not changed. And maybe we have to change a little of, a way of seeing things. What if capitalism does not work for us and communism does not work for us? What do we need to do? Maybe we can try a different model, but we are not daring enough to go there. Okay? What if the elective politics is not working for us? What is it that we need to do? We are not daring enough to go there. So these are some of the things that are doing what? Are holding us back, and we are yet to discover ourselves. I think that's the problem we have.
We talked about ancient Greek philosophy, the Greek philosophy, and the Romans at that time. So we talked that there was that as the cornerstone of Western civilization, yeah? Then you have this period when the Christians come in and the church becomes also the political throne, in Europe. So the church is in charge, yeah? And you have that period where some libraries are banned.
Yeah.
Libraries are banned. And libraries have been banned even. The Romans were also banning libraries. They banned the library at Egypt, yeah?
Alexandria. I think the library, one of the greatest. They say we would have learned a lot had it not been banned.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the Muslims also banned it. They were the last to ban it. It's Apocrypha says, or whatever you call it, legend says that the library had so many books and, the paper quality or whatever, the scrolls or whatever it was, it took 6 months of a consecutive fire. So I found this interesting. Anyway, the libraries are banned, yes? The books that means that the knowledge from the past has been cut off from the people in the present. And maybe a few intellectuals, maybe they still have access to it, yeah? But anyway, this plunges Europe into what they call the Dark Ages. Although there are people who say there is no such thing as the Dark Ages. But let's assume it's true. There was the Dark Ages where there was no growth in terms of ideas, in terms of thinking, in terms of thought, in terms of philosophy, in terms of technology. So it's a dark period. And towards this time when you have this guy called Galileo Galilei. He comes later and he is a thinker. So you can see the hang-ups of the Dark Ages. He says that the earth goes round the sun and he gets killed for it. Yes? So you can see the hang-ups of the Dark Ages are still there when the church is still in power. Anyway, you have something happening. Technology. The invention of the printing press. The printing press is invented by some German called Gutenberg. Yes, Johannes Gutenberg, if I'm not wrong. Gutenberg invents the printing press. What happens? Scrolls, books start being printed. Previously, if you wanted to have a copy of the Bible, you couldn't, because somebody had to write it. So if somebody has to write it, maybe you will have one book. So you'll find somebody who has the book of John, and you have the book of Matthew. Anyway, because of the printing, books, the Bible, now people can have access to the Bible, right? They start reading the scriptures for themselves. What do they find out? They find out the church has been lying to them. Yes. And that is, the church has been lying to them about certain things in scripture. Like the concept of when the Pope or when the church was saying, if somebody from your family is dead, they go to a place called purgatory. You pay an indulgence to us as the church. We will pray for them to be taken from them so that they can go to heaven, especially if they had sins. So Martin Luther questions this. What does this lead to? A revolution in the church, an intellectual revolution, the Protestant Reformation, which then actually frees Germany from the Vatican, because at this time the Pope was actually the political power of all the European countries.
Yeah.
So you have Germany, Switzerland, and a lot of those Protestant countries. They actually break free. Why? Because they are now thinking differently. They think differently from Rome, from the Vatican. So now they have their political independence, intellectual independence, spiritual independence. Where does this come from? The printing press. That's one thing. That's the church. There's this other side. The Greek philosophers. People start printing and reading the Greek philosophers.
True.
What does this lead to? It leads to the Renaissance.
Renaissance.
And the Renaissance is a flowering of creative and intellectual thought. And what does this lead to? It leads to now Europe. Look at it. Around
enlightenment.
Look at around this time.
Yeah,
look at around this time.
I see.
Around this time, Europe starts now going out to conquer. It starts going out to get that's when they are actually even going around the world, navigating, coming to Africa.
True.
This is actually the time, the Industrial Revolution, actually. That's what I was looking for.
Later on comes,
Yes. This is actually the real thing that actually leads to first of all, the American Revolution, which brings in ideas of liberty, and all, liberty, what was it?
Equality.
Liberty, equality, and fraternity, which then leads to the French Revolution, which is now the falling of the feudal system and the monarchy. And the French Revolution leads to all the revolutions in Europe. Yeah. All this starts with the invention of the printing press, technology. So now let's come back to Africa. In the pre-colonial time, we had our philosophy, our way of thinking, our culture. And then what happens? Something called colonization. We get Christianity, things fall apart. And I think what happens to Africa, we have become modernized, but it is modernized by taking up this European way of thinking. But paradoxically, we are now in the dark ages. We entered the dark ages. Why? We stopped thinking for ourselves.
True.
We stopped thinking for ourselves.
True.
Right now, government doesn't think. It benchmarks. No, it's true. It benchmarks.
Independent thinking. We lack it.
Government won't think. It will send people out there. Benchmarking. Yeah? They call it benchmarking. That's basically going to receive information, how to think from other people. We don't think, as like independently.
Capisa.
Even in the academy, you say our scholars are thinking. But our scholars, I told you, when I went to university and we were taught about philosophy, we were taught philosophy as Socrates, Plato.
The Eurocentric philosophy.
Eurocentric. Yeah. So we are still not thinking. So we need what they got. A technology which is going to help us learn the past. And that is where I think the internet comes in. This is where you are talking, right? This is where you go on TikTok, you start finding information about our African culture is there. So don't you think that we are now, thanks to the internet, entering or have entered a period of African Renaissance? And that this, as we are actually even seeing with the fame and the popularity of Ibrahim Traore.
Yeah, true.
And as we see, even with the fame and popularity of Gen Z in Kenya, what they did last year, and how it's actually resonating with other African countries, and actually even how we say that the Gen Z thing brought in a way a new political philosophy that has not existed in this country. The philosophy of we the people can actually, we are the sovereign, we the people, we the people can actually make decisions for ourselves without the politicians. Don't you think we are entering that phase of African Renaissance, and it will impact our political and economic fortunes?
I believe we are in that period, I'll call it, I'll still call it a continuum. Yeah, there has been awareness among the African themselves, and people are waking up from the slumber that they have been for a long time. They are becoming so much involved in the political activity and the way the state function. And these are all thanks to the internet. Personally, like I came to you know, when we are talking about, for example, the book club that is currently you know, flourishing within the Kenyan you know, authorship. I think that the solid behind it is because of the internet. Something has to start from somewhere, and I think we are in that pace. But we also have some, you know, tendrils still pushing us back, pulling us back, which we have to think about, because in as much as internet has exposed and, you know, amplified our voices, I'll say that it has also disorganized us. We lack a sense of organization, because internet means freedom. When we share things and thoughts in internet, everyone can speak anything. It means freedom, and freedom sometimes can mean a sense of you know, a lack of organization. Recklessness. You know, people just have to voice something, but because we are free to share our points in the internet, one picks it and it becomes a spiral into something. It's people become
freedom without responsibility.
Yeah, freedom without responsibility. Thank you. So, what I think is something that a structure that we can rely upon, that we can work on systematically to define exactly what we need, so that what we take out to the internet is something that we know we can believe on, and something that, you know, can revolutionize our country and our way of thinking. And I think this all starts from, it goes back to what we were talking about, a new way of thinking.
So now my question is, now that we have the internet, and what happens? Let's say we have all these discussions about African philosophy. Do you have a vision of or a mental picture of how this plays out? What happens when people are on TikTok being taught African philosophy, which is happening? What happens to people? Like, ordinary people are on TikTok, they are learning African philosophy, they are learning Luo philosophy, they are learning all these other, you know, their culture. Ordinary people, artists, like, you know, us, writers, musicians, and we have actually even been seeing, like, we've been seeing even some festivals being done. It's a cultural festival from different communities, going to listen to music from your culture. And it's not even traditional, it's modern music, but in your language, right?
Yeah, true.
We have this happening. We have, and let's say even now, let's say you have artists, musicians, you have people in academia, you have even our political leaders as the decades go, because, you know, the old guard is dying out and a new generation comes in. So let's say this new generation has this new way of thinking which is centered on Africa. So we consume African content, African music, we read African philosophers. If I go on the internet, on Facebook, and I read Kwach Abonyo from his African lens, it influences how I view the world. What happens when so many people in Africa are starting to think through the African lens instead of Eurocentric? What do you think will happen?
I think that's what comes the resonance that we are talking about. Yeah.
And how will that play out?
Things will have to change. And for things to change, I think we'll have to destabilize the structure of what we know now. And that is where now what we call the revolution comes in.
And how does it look? I just want you to paint it for me.
I'll use Steve Biko's words, the African consciousness. When it catch up with us, we are able to identify truly we are, questions the government, the leadership, and we work solidly behind one another, or we are too aware of everything happening in the country that we cannot be hoodwinked. One of the challenges that we have as a continent is that we have been, there are a lot of things that are straining us as a community. One time we have a small clique of people, seeking for change or seeking change, and the other one, a vast majority are still tied to the old school way of thinking. People who still worship politicians, for example, or still believe in the idea of the Kenyan way of politics, ethnicity and all these things. So these are things that it's not easy to root out of the country at the moment. It is actually very challenging. And when after African consciousness, we will be able to know who we are. And I think the aspect of knowing who we are is the changing point. Government will have to work, even if it is capitalism that is working, and things will have to be accounted for, and there will be change. I think what we lack is simply the African consciousness.
What about economically, like?
Of course, when the government works, the economics will actually do. When people are conscious,
What about socially? How will we relate with each other?
Yes, we'll feel there will be a sense of nationhood among ourselves. There's the sense of patriotism, and
patriotism to the state.
All there's that spirit of nationhood among us, the sense of patriotism, and there's that togetherness as a nation.
You're still talking politically, but I mean socially, like in our families. How will we relate with each other when we talk about gender? We have gender wars, men versus women. How will these things play out when we come to marriage? How will this
consciousness always also have its demerits, because when we talk about consciousness, for example, it means that people knowing who they are. Things like the patriarchy, which is quite dominant at the moment in African society, will have to be phased out, because people tend to be too independent. I know my right and I know who I am. So some of these things will have to adapt and readapt, and we'll have to live with them. So things like the relationship between the families, they'll have to change and adapt to the situation. I may not envision what might happen, but I think the very foundation of change, as you are asking it, is the seeking of the African consciousness.
And is it all positive?
Not really.
Like
there has to be this. That's always the flip
side. It could
lead
to terrorism as well.
True. There has to be flip side of everything.
Or because Europe right now, or the West is actually going through a renaissance of its own, a cultural renaissance. Yes. What you call MAGA, Make America Great Again. When you hear people like Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate, these sorts of internet radical thinkers, they are bringing in an idea. When you listen to like Jordan Peterson, he talks about dominance hierarchy. And of course, dominance hierarchy, when you take it politically, he's talking about white supremacy. So they are going through their own cultural renaissance, which actually is more of going back to their idea of imperialism and conquering. And I have seen this on the internet. There is a lot of nostalgia for empire among the West. Even on TikTok, or Twitter, you find young people, young men, they have this nostalgia for conquering other nations. So as we are going through our own renaissance of knowing ourselves. They are going through their own of knowing themselves as conquerors and colonizers. So what happens at that point? Do you think that they will attempt a new colonization, and will we be ready?
Which kind of new colonization do America need to attempt when they're already having it? Huh?
Well, not America.
The West,
yes,
yes,
the West
it's true.
generally.
They're already having it. The
Well,
colonization
you've seen wars coming up in the last few years.
I have seen, but I think
these are colonizing. They are colonizing.
Yeah,
wars.
the wars that there are the major wars between the powers, and there are also wars that are here, which are which are actually orchestrated by the West. And I think these wars, Muswahili, these wars are they have always their agenda. Well, say being capitalist sometimes is very damaging, but it is an ideology which I've actually viewed with a lot of skepticism, because I see the sense of capitalism is dominance, and that does not mean that I like communism either. Almost nearly all the economic framework or the political ideologies of the West do not appeal to me, and that's why I think that the African needs to find its own footing, which defines it. You see, right now, for example, if you see the kind of revolution going in the West, especially in the United States, you realize that there's that spirit of supremacy, which the citizens and the state itself, what embodies or thinks of, and they always put themselves in a certain pedestal, that it is always them first, then other things follow, and you realize they have, because of their power and all their ideology, everything will have to go their way. It is either our way or the highway, and I think this is a form of colonization that we are grappling with now. And to some degree, not actually to some degree, it's actually a fact that the Africa has not found its footing, the real footing, because of this. Yeah, we are dealing with world powers which control the economic, ecosystem of the globe, and yet they control us in every aspect. They control our economy, the currency, control who we are, and these are the things we are grappling with. So to get out of this will require a lot of effort, because they're controlling the kind of economy we are in. And so this is why I say, for Africa to find itself or to find its footing is first change the way we think, to change our consciousness. And I've always ended, how we are going to achieve that, I still do not know.
Perfect. Shout out to Vera Omocha, because I've seen her comment on a couple of our videos, that it's an entire semester that she has gotten on those videos. So I feel that this here is also an entire semester's worth of information about African philosophy, and we have gone further than what they will do at the semester, because we have gone to the West, the East, come back to Africa, connected it to the political and the economic philosophy, and now also brought it to how this can lead to our renaissance and so on. So asante sana. So there you have it. That was Kwach Abonyo, who was here with us for a riveting discussion on African philosophy. My name is Eric Rogara. Some people know me as Miyamoto Muswahili, and actually the reason I have that name is precisely because of the topic we were discussing today. So until next time, this was Conversations in Literature. Conversations in Literature is sponsored by Nairobi Academic Press, and if you have not yet subscribed to our channel, do that without further ado. Until next time.